Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. Well, welcome everybody. So glad to see you this morning. We're very excited to hear what Todd Gallicano has to say because he's got such an amazing career going and so varied, and it has tapped into whatever those creative forces are that we all depend on so much. And sometimes they tend to desert us a little bit. So, John's going to do
Yeah,
a more formal introduction of Todd because they've become friends living in the same area, which is great. And yeah, so take it away.
yeah, we thank you, Robin, and welcome everybody again. Yeah, Todd and I got to meet last year, and it was because of our last retreat. He had seen a little poster I'd put up in our neighborhood, where we in the city where we live, and he saw it and reached out, and I'm so glad he did. He's become a friend of mine, and we have wonderful conversations over coffee every once in a while, and he has done some very interesting projects and working on some interesting projects. And I just thought that all of y'all would be really interested to hear from him. He's sold screenplays to DreamWorks and Netflix, has developed scripts with Fox and Warner Brothers. He's also the executive producer and screenwriter of the Netflix Christmas movie Best Christmas Ever with Heather Graham, Jason Biggs, and Brandy Norwood. It remained in the top 10 for several weeks. He's also spoken about storytelling and the shared human experience to thousands of people, really around the world. And recently, he was a speaker at Mind Valley, and some of you may have heard of Mind Valley. And he spoke at one of their conferences in Amsterdam, where he shared his latest work, "The Power of Myth Making: How to Tell Your Story and Change the World." And as a creative hypnotist, yes, you heard me say that right. Todd works with artists, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to dissolve self doubt, move beyond mental blocks, and access the deeper currents of inspiration within the subconscious. Welcome, Todd.
Yay.
Thank you. I don't have anything else to say. That was it. You nailed it.
Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to speak to writers always. I love speaking to writers. It's one of my I think one of the reasons why I'm here. One of my purposes is to help encourage writers tell their stories. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as to what that looks like. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of a history of how I came into the business and what I've been doing and how I got to where I am now. So I started out, I lived in Southern California, and I was in high school, and I was fortunate enough to, at a high school in California that had a television program. And so we had access to a lot of equipment. We did a show every week, but we were also film geeks, and so we would write, scripts, and we would shoot these things on the weekends using the school's equipment. And so right after high school, I wound up getting a internship with an Italian film producer by the name of Dino De Laurentiis, who was a very famous Italian film producer, total character. He had worked with Fellini and just done some pretty amazing things. And so I worked at Dino's for a few years as an intern, and then a development assistant, and then like an assistant story editor. And while there, I worked on projects. I worked with like the Wachowskis, projects like Bound. I always say I was like I got to read The Matrix when it was a spec. So I was kind of in the mix, and it was really cool to be. I was 17 at the time, and working with these pretty incredible writers and directors like Sam Raimi and people like that. And from there, I went to NYU Film School, and so I was there for a while. I'm originally from New York, so it was going back to my home, and so I did film school there, studied, did a film thesis, etc., and then eventually moved back to LA and got back into the business. And that was mostly looked like getting rewrite gigs and that sort of thing, and a couple of like actual jobs, which I'll talk about. One that's a lot of fun. It's my favorite Hollywood story. It was the script that I did based on the life of James Dean. So I'll talk about that in a bit as well. So I worked in the industry for a while, had made contacts, but then it was, it's kind of hard, sort of the roller coaster of creative work. And so I wound up getting a gig as a creative director for an internet company for a while. Eventually, I sold a script to DreamWorks. It was a project called Ash. It was based on a comic book by Joe Quesada, and that allowed me to sort of quit my job and focus full time on writing. And from there, I just, as John talked about, I had a lot of projects that I sold, got optioned, etc. And I sort of run the gamut. I mainly focused on comedies. I did a rewrite of the movie, The Thin Line, a rewrite of the sequel for the movie. They haven't made it yet. It's The Thin Line Between Love and Hate. Those of you know that movie. And I worked with Jason Blum on that. That was cool. And so I worked with producers at Warner Brothers. One of my friends that the one was the producer for Ash was this guy Andrew Lazar. So I had the opportunity to work with a lot of writers and producers, and in around 2010, I met someone who became a great mentor of mine. So I'm a big believer in mentors, and I'll also talk about that in a bit, where the hero's journey, not as just narrative structure, but also as our experience of being human and how it tracks. So mentors are a big part of it. And so I met one of my favorite writer-directors, this guy by the name of Charles Shire, who became sort of my mentor and co-writer and writing partner. And we worked on this script, was called The Holiday Letter, that then became Best Christmas Ever. And so it wound up getting sold to Netflix and then made into a film. I was fortunate enough to be on set for the entire duration. And that's also a process, the story of sort of seeing your script from the page getting made and all of the ways that it changes in ways that you hope it didn't, and the way it sort of comes out. It's very much like an experience in and of itself. The way you kind of have to be you get very humbled by the experience of that as you go through this process and you see how much sort of power you have as a writer to really influence things. So I worked on that and other projects as well. Sold a pitch to Netflix. It was a comedy, and kind of always sort of working on various things. In around the time that I sold Newsletter, I had this idea for a book series. And the idea was bigger than a script, so I knew that it was going to have to be a book, and I also thought it would be good to create my own underlying source material, which is a big deal in Hollywood, obviously. So I started writing this book. The first one, it was called Guardians of the Griffin's Claw. It wound up selling to Random House. So it's a 3-book series. I'm working on the 4th book. It's a little slow going. But that was sort of another route for my imagination writing to go in and experience the world of publishing. And that allowed me also to speak at library conferences and schools and talk about storytelling in the hero's journey. And as I started to get more into that aspect of that world, the publishing world, I started to realize how much I really loved encouraging other people to tell their stories. And as my course is called, The Power of Myth Making: How to Tell Your Story and Change the World, I believe that everyone has a story to tell, and whether you realize it or not, that story has the power to change the world. And every story it has a ripple effect. Sometimes it's maybe it's just to entertain someone during a difficult period. Maybe it's for that person to be seen or heard, right? Their experience being reflected in the story or on the screen. How many of us have experienced that ourselves in life when we watch a movie or read a book and we feel we've seen ourselves in it, and it helps us, right? It makes us feel less alone. And that's the other big part of it. I feel like storytelling really brings people together. It's why the hero's journey, works in all these different stories, and why it connects us, because it's a reflection of the human experience. And when we tell our stories, we get rid of all of the things that are keeping us apart, right? Keeping us separate. It doesn't matter where you're from, what your religion you are, whatever. The experience of being human is what we connect on. So I kind of went down that road of creating what would be a course on storytelling. But one of the things that I encountered was, as a creative, I could learn everything there was to know about story and structure. And I could read books and go to conferences and take master classes and all these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I still had to be creative, right? And it's me alone with the page. And a lot of times, creativity is not that easily sort of you can't slip into it very easily, right? It's sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to get into the mood to create. And I could have all the discipline, but if it wasn't coming, it wasn't coming. And a lot of that had to do with maybe sort of internal barriers and things that we have that we hold on to often out of fear. And so I began to study different alternate states of mind. So the theta state, as those of you are familiar with the different states of mind, theta state is a very creative state of mind. And how do we stay in theta? How do we, it's like when we take showers and we have great ideas. It's because we're in theta. The warm water triggers theta. When we maybe wake up in the morning at like 4:30 a.m. and we're alone in bed, sometimes we have our best ideas because we're in theta. So I started to explore ways to help people slip into that creative flow quickly and easily. And that's when I began to study hypnosis. And in particular, my sort of niche is creative hypnosis, helping creatives be creative and overcome the sort of inner dragons or slay the inner dragons that are keeping them from being creative. And sometimes that looks like self-doubt or procrastination, or there's time. There's all these different things that play into the reasons why we have problems just creating when we want to, when and where we want to. So that's kind of it. I think maybe is that cover enough there? Do we want to move to questions?
We should mention that, yeah, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat at any time. And yeah, does anybody have a question now? Since Todd has asked. Yeah, I have questions, but I'm gonna see what other people think first. And feel free just to go ahead and unmute yourself if you can at this point, if you do have a question. Um, Karen, did you raise your hand? Or was that just you stretching? Okay. Well, I mean, I would love to hear more about your talk, Todd, and I was able to actually hear it, the Mind Valley speech that you gave, and I thought it was really, really awesome. Can you maybe share a little bit about that, like why you chose that particular speech to give to Mind Valley, and how that reception was?
Yeah, I always think about story and the impact it's had on my life, and it's probably why I became a storyteller in many ways because of the impact that it's had. And I wanted to communicate to people how important their stories are. How there was a time when we think of mythology and we think of myths, we think of sort of these ancient stories, but in reality, we are all living myths, right? So our life is a myth in the making. And just as those myths in ancient times communicated something to us, and we could feel ourselves in those stories or see ourselves in those stories, just as we are when we tell our stories, we are seeing, we are inviting people to see themselves in our story. And to me, that's so powerful. And it's powerful in terms of like how it creates global community. And for Mind Valley in particular, that's something that's really important to them, this idea of community and this global community. And to communicate to people, okay, how do we change the world? Well, you can change the world through story. And you do that by just taking down the barriers and things that keep us separated when we see ourselves in each other. So I wanted to encourage people to tell their story. The guy that introduced me at that event was this a friend of mine, Mitch Hutchcraft. He just came out with a book about his experience. When he was 6 years old, he read a book about climbing Mount Everest. And it was written by an actor by the name of Brian Blessed, the guy who played the Hawkman in Flash Gordon. He did other things, but I always remember as the Hawkman. Anyway,
Mhm.
so he wrote this book about Mount Everest, and when Mitch was 6, he read this book and he decided he was going to climb Mount Everest. And so, about, I don't know, maybe 25 years later, he winds up climbing Everest, but he does so in a way that no one had ever done, and he broke major records. He did a triathlon, the longest triathlon, to the top of Everest. So he swam the English Channel, he
Oh my God.
biked across Europe, he ran from India to Kathmandu, and then he ascended Everest. Okay,
Mm-mm.
and I had the opportunity to I met him on an expedition that I went on in Indonesia. So I have a friend that I actually met at Mine Valley. This guy Jimmy Nyreen, he's an adventurer and speaker, and he invited me to this expedition to climb an active volcano in Indonesia, Mount Rinjani, with him and these former sort of British Special Forces and this Royal Marine, Mitch of Royal Marine, and I said yes because I'm someone that's always writing about journeys and stories and talking about the
Mm-hmm.
hero's journey. And I'm always on my own inner journey, especially when I studied hypnosis. And I thought, you know what, it's time for me to do something outside of myself. Go on an
Larger
Alex
than
Honnold.
yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. That's literally like, structured like a hero's journey. And I'm not a hiker. I'm afraid of heights, right? It was all these things that I disliked, and I just said yes. And I said, I'll figure it out. So I go
Gotcha.
on this trip because I always think about, always you always listen for the gold, right? There's always in life, as you experience life, there's always, even things that are uncomfortable, there's gold there. There's something to take away. There's a treasure. And so I go on this expedition. I wind up becoming good friends with Mitch, and I hear this story about him and what he had done and why he had done it. And Mitch, this is perfect. Like this is exactly embodies what I'm trying to talk about, what I'm saying to people. It's like, look at this guy, Brian Blessed, had no idea that when he wrote that book, some 6-year-old kid was going to pick it up, read it, and then 20
Mhm.
some odd years later make history. I guarantee you he had no clue that that was going to happen, but that's the power of story. And those are the ripple effects that we don't know. When we sit down with our page and we're in our, we don't know what's going to happen when it ripples out. I mean, my books, one of the fun things about it is it takes place in this idea that there's this Department of Mythical Wildlife within the Department of the Interior. And so mythical creatures are real, they live among us. There's a reason why we can't see them, it's sort of ancient curse, but the park rangers are in on the secret. And so if you want to explore the world of Sam London, you go to a national park. There's a couple of national parks in each book. And so I would get messages from kids who were inspired to become park rangers because they had read the book. It's
Mm.
like that was never even on my radar. I was just like trying to come up with cool things to, in the world to create. And then I wind up, this one school had a dress up day and I'm getting pictures of these kids that were like dressed up as different characters. One started really loving, Japanese folklore and mythology because of one of the characters in it. And so you never know what's going to happen when you tell your story. So all that to say, I had Mitch introduce me for my Mind Valley talk because there's no better example, than him to communicate to everyone in the room how important it is to tell your story. Sometimes it's just a matter of writing it down and it being, even if you don't share it with anyone, it's still a cathartic process and it changes you. And when it changes you, that ripples out as well. So that
Mm.
can have an impact on
Good
the
point.
community and the people around you. So
Hmm. I'm really interested in your hypnosis techniques because I'm sure every time you get stuck, you can't go, call up Todd and say, please hypnotize me.
yes.
Do you have like after people practice, is it somewhat like meditation or what can people get out of on beyond a one shot deal
Yeah.
to practice self-hypnosis?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of times when we see hypnosis used on people, it's almost to use it to stop maybe a habit that they don't like, right? Like smoking or whatever. And so you
Mm.
you connect the cigarette to something awful. If you've ever seen this before in one of my hypnosis retreats and classes, I watched as he took two people that were smokers and got them to connect the cigarette to something horrible, right? And it's very visceral, and you can understand. And so what that technique is called, it's called anchoring. And so what I do is I create an anchor I call it the creative circuit. And so what I do is I create this anchor inside of trance. It's a feeling, this feeling of creative flow that then we connect with a gesture, and then that gesture can be used later outside of hypnosis. Okay,
Hmm.
so and it's really more a matter of at that moment when you sit down. And in the course, I have activations integrated into the course and subliminals. So people are using the activations. They're not live activations, obviously, they're recorded, but there's one for right before you work, right? Right before you work, right after you work. So there are these ones that sort of get you into that state of flow. And the more you do it, obviously, the easier it gets, the more you're able to connect with that feeling again because you're recreating it and you're remembering it, and it becomes almost like a muscle memory.
Interesting.
Interesting. So do
Yeah.
people need to they meet with you one on one first and then get some of this, or can they just buy a course or something that includes these activations? How does it work? Or either way?
The course has it. The course does have it, and I do have the creative circuit in the course, so that's something that can be practiced inside of the course as well. And it's obviously there's the sort of disconnect right between the creative inspiration and the creative execution. That was a gap that I felt like needed to be filled. And so the course is intended to sort of help that. Not only are you learning about story and structure, and I'm taking you through the process of well, whether it's I never really believed in course where you're going to finish a first draft in like 30 days because creativity is subjective. Everyone moves at a different pace, and when you force it, that's where things become a problem, right? So it's creativity isn't learned or forced; it's sort of remembered, and so when you put artificial deadlines, sometimes that can just create its own sort of dragon for us to slay, where we're not meeting the deadlines and da da da. So the course really is intended to help people, whether it's finish a completed piece or get a lot of it done in a sense, an outline or what have you, but also get into the mindset of what it's going to take to finish it. So you're sort of creating a creative GPS in a way, like a map, and then helping you get into that mindset consistently so you can create. And I do that. The other part of it is I also like this idea. I love this idea, and I integrate it into the course. Is this idea of a narrative gym? And we go to the gym to exercise our muscles. Uh, we need to go to a narrative gym to exercise that creative muscle. And I do it with story reps, so questions. And each lesson has a certain number of questions where you answer and you start to build over the course of the course, this sort of narrative structure, and you're answering the questions, you're creating the context for what you're wanting to do, plus you're integrating the hypnosis. So I'm kind of taking it from both the mindset and also the actual practical
Mm,
application.
okay.
Hmm. Jerome has an interesting question. When you are preparing to write a new story, in what way does the framing of your own story impact the way you approach the new story?
The framing of my own story impact the framing of the new story? Well, it depends. So it depends on what the story is and how it reflects my experience, my life experience. We always it's was you write what you know, right? Is the is the thing, you write what you know, and a lot of times what you know comes through in ways that are unexpected. And I've talked about this on my Instagram. I love this story about Steven Spielberg. Those of you who have heard it, bear with me. It's about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you've ever seen that movie, the climactic moment in that movie is when the aliens and the humans are trying to communicate with each other, right? And so over the course of the movie, they're trying to communicate. It hasn't gone well, but in the end, in that final scene, they're able to. And to take a step back, Steven Spielberg, when he was, I think, in his early teens, his parents divorced, and his mom was a musician, and his dad was a computer scientist. right? And that climactic moment in Close Encounters, how do the aliens communicate with humans? Well, the humans create music using computers, and suddenly they can communicate, right? Uh, Years later, Spielberg was on the Actors Studio with James Lipton, which was a great show, James Lipton,
Hmm.
and he brought this up to Spielberg about this particular thing, and said, did you realize this? That there's the, and Spielberg said, I wish I could say that I did realize it, that I knew that that was my mother and father, but not
Hmm.
until this moment. And
Wow.
so here was this guy, he had put this in there. It was working inside of his subconscious, and it came out through fantasy. So
Hmm.
sometimes we're not even aware how our
Yeah.
story will affect. And the idea too is like he's not only working with this in his subconscious, but then how is that rippling out? What
Right.
effect is it having?
Yep.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
And
The
I always
same.
think of if when people say write what you know, or there's all the cultural misappropriation stuff going on, if you can tap into the emotion of what it felt like to be at the Salem witch trials,
mhm.
which Arthur Miller did very
Yeah,
successfully. Nobody can say he was there, but
yeah,
isn't it okay? Or non-Jewish people who write about the Holocaust, isn't it wonderful that those people understand what went on?
yeah.
So it's so important to be tapping into your own emotions as you bring out stories about completely different things.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. And I'm going to be speaking at Mind Valley this summer, and I'm doing a workshop with this actress Vanessa Rubio. And one of the things and I feel like this is also the same with writers, but actors also do this even more so. And we call it quantum jumping, right? They're like quantum jumping into other versions of themselves, right? If you believe like there's all these different timelines, like there's a version of them that's like that exists somewhere in the universe. And the idea of like how we step into versions of ourselves quickly and easily, like how do we embody it? What is it going to feel like? What do we look like? How do we dress? How do we speak? Like all these different things. As actors, they have to embody it, right? As writers, we have to imagine it. And a lot of times it'll come out. For example, I wrote a script where there's this scene at the top of the Chrysler building, and there's a character that's like perched on one of those gargoyles. Okay, I am deathly afraid of heights. It was so hard for me to write this scene because it gave me so much anxiety because I was visualizing it so clearly that I was on that gargoyle and it was freaking me out. Like I was having a really hard time dealing with
Yeah.
it. And it's that when you tap into that, another great example is when I was on set for Best Christmas Ever, there was a scene that I remember writing, and I remember the emotion of writing it and this feeling. It was this the and they it didn't really make a lot of it didn't make it into the final film, but it was the character Heather's character, Charlotte's character, uh, basically saying, I did like everything I wanted to do, I wasn't able to do, and I keep failing every year. And Christmas was this sort of punctuation mark at the end of the year, sort of reminding me of all the ways that I couldn't show up for my family and give them all the things that they want. And it's this super intensely emotional scene because she just sort of lets it all out. She gets really vulnerable. And I remember writing this and I was so like moved, like I was feeling that feeling I had tears in my eyes. And then when I was on set and she's doing it, it was like muscle memory. She was doing it and I was instantly having this emotional response to it. And it just shows also the power of that subconscious feeling. It's why hypnosis works, right? So it's like I was hearing it and it was triggering this muscle memory that's an emotional memory in me. And I was feeling it all over again like it was the first time. It was
Wow.
wild. Yeah.
That's really
Great.
cool. Speaking of feelings, Lisa asked a question. She's asking about the theta state. So, do you recognize it when you're in it, and then when you know you're in it, can you sustain it, or is it fleeting?
You can sustain it. So meditating, you're mainly in theta, right? You don't want to be in delta because then you're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
But with theta, it's that meditative state, And there's different degrees, right? So there's more of a deep theta, and then there's just a theta that you can be in even when we're talking right now. There's different ways to get into it. I've studied various ways. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Silva method. The Silva method is a way to slip into theta very quickly and easily with like a 1, 2, 3.
Hmm.
But you have to train your body and your mind to understand what those means. Like it's the 3, 2, 1 actually 3, 2, 1. And so, 3 is the body, 2 is the mind, and then 1 is this sort of focus and the centering moment where then you slip into theta. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Hmm.
But theta can be accessed anytime, anywhere. Really, if you have sort of the means to do it, it really is about relaxing mind and body and getting focused. And there's ways, obviously, to trigger it through anchors and gestures that can be embedded in through trance and hypnosis.
How well do I think I've seen like theta binaural beats.
Mhm.
How
Very, yeah,
do those work pretty well as
absolutely,
well?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I do a activation or like a hypnotic activation, like the ones in the course, there is a theta track in the background, very subtly. That pattern, that beat, is happening because it's synchronizing your brain into theta. If you've
Hmm.
ever done delta, if you have trouble sleeping, you can try delta. That it does help. So you're having that sort of subtle thing. You can't really hear it. It's sort of right under the level of music.
Hmm.
The same with subliminal tracks that can be very helpful. And there's one with the course. You listen to it. You don't really want to listen to it when you're driving, but you can listen to it when you're around the house, maybe right before bed. And it's just music, but right beneath the music is a voice that's speaking to you and telling and whispering sort of in your ear, in a sense. And you can even create your own subliminals, to do different things for you. And if you do it over the course of several, well, probably like the first, if you've never done one, maybe 24, 25 days of listening, you really start to see it show up.
Hmm.
So it's something you have to make sure to be consistent with for it to really start
Yeah,
working well.
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, and you can, like I said, you can do them for everything. I did one. I've done a lot of public speaking, but when I went to do Mind Valley, it was going to be a very different stage, and it's a very well known stage. It's a big stage, and I was nervous. And so I started this public speaking subliminal before, and also my teacher David had done an activation for me about it, and it helped tremendously. I didn't. I'm a person who shakes just normally, and if I get super nervous, it's kind of absurd. There's this really embarrassing story. It's one of my first book signings that I had for Guardians. There was a line of kids lined up, and they were so excited. And I got a coffee beforehand, like a big old coffee, and I was already nervous. I couldn't write my name. Like I could not
What?
sign my name. It was so embarrassing. I felt so bad. The first kid, it was a disaster. And I took the mom aside. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna get you a better, like I'm gonna do it right. I'll send the book to you. I'm so sorry. But when I did this talk, I wasn't nervous at all. It was wild.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree because
Yeah,
I was able to see it and whatever you did, it worked
yeah,
because
right.
you
Like
were
I'm
very
like,
on, you were concise, you were entertaining, it was an excellent
thank you. Yeah, no, I'm
presentation.
like, I watch it back and I'm like, what? Like, who's that guy? Like, it was pretty wild. But it's funny because it's like I met that version of myself. We talked about versions. It's like going on the Mount Rajani trip. One of the things was I want to meet the guy that does that. That version of me that said yes and winds up at the top of that mountain. Like, who's that guy? Because I haven't met him yet. I'm curious to see what he has to say and what he does. So.
Wow.
I'm curious to know more about how it was working for Netflix. So something that um, we are talking a lot about with our community and those who have attended our retreats is what are other ways to explore outside working the traditional Hollywood studio system? And I know Netflix is still big.
Yeah,
Netflix
yeah.
has become big. But I'm just curious to know how that experience was for you, doing it with Netflix, and any other cool story you'd like to share about that particular project.
Yeah. So the project itself had sold. I had written it, and then Charles came on to direct it, and then him and I worked on it together. And by the time it sold to this producer by the name of Brad Crevoy, and he's produced just a gazillion holiday movies. He's very well known for these kinds of films. And it was supposed to be a feature. It was going to go, I think it was going to be with Paramount. And then, uh, and then I think, I'm trying to remember how it came about, but somehow that deal wasn't going to go. But Netflix stepped in. He was doing. Oh, I know. He was doing another movie with Charles was doing a movie with Netflix at that point. He was doing a movie called The Noel Diary, and
Oh yeah.
and they enjoyed working with him. So they were curious about what other things, and so we said, well, we've got this holiday letter, and so the script sold to Netflix. Now at the time, originally Charles was going to direct, but because he had just directed Noel Diary, he decided not to direct, that he would just produce. And so they hired another director. And so Netflix was responsible for that. So they come in, they hire another director, and then they have us make changes, right? So we have to rewrite some things to deal with like budget issues, and then eventually we get the cast attached, and it's going to shoot in Utah. And so Netflix, the way they work was there was an executive, her name's Christina, there that deals with this particular budget range, and she then basically hires out almost like a production company that shoots and does the film. Like they do the movie and Netflix distributes it, obviously. So, and it's kind of crazy because when you're dealing with a streamer, your movie, it's not like you have to worry about box office. Your movie is going to be seen by 100 million people. Like, just that's going to happen. It's not, it's more about it's just like that's what's going to happen, and it's going to be all over the world on day one, like instantaneously in all these different languages, and so you're not necessarily working towards a box office. You're looking at it, and Charles always wanted to make a perennial, something that people would watch every year. Obviously, the script went through a lot of changes. So I wound up having the opportunity to be on set for the entire thing.
And was that, did they invite you to do that, or did you ask? Like, that
well,
seems unusual to me.
yeah, right. It's very unusual. It was, Brad uh, say something really nice about him. He's kind of known to be a very hard, I will say this, he's kind of known to be a very hard negotiator. Okay. But he's a good guy. Like he's very generous. And I remember we were in the process of doing rewrites, and Netflix had come to us and they wanted us to make changes. And Charles was kind of over it at this time. He's like, dude, I'm not making any more changes. Like, this is ridiculous. And so Brad said, he said, listen, if you guys can make these changes, he said, Todd, he goes, you'll be on set the whole time. I'll make sure of that. He goes, we're not going to put it on paper. He goes, you've got my promise that I'll make that happen. And so Charles and I talked about it. He's like, okay, we'll do it. We'll do another run. And so we did. And sure enough, to his credit, Cravoy had me on set, and Netflix, I got paid for being on set. And what was cool was the director and I got along really well. Mary Lambert, her name was, and she was kind of this. I don't think she had ever done a comedy before, but she was sort of this iconic music video director. She had directed like Janet Jackson's, like she had directed like Madonna's "Like a Virgin." Like she had done some pretty amazing music videos, and so I was on set and was great. We would if we made changes on the fly, she would send me to go brief the actors. So I would go talk to Heather or talk to Brandy or Jason or whoever, Matt, and tell them about the changes and what have you. So I was actively
Wow,
participating,
that's
which was
really
great.
unique. Yeah.
And now here's the other part of this. So like you watch it get shot, and you as a writer, you're kind of experiencing it. Obviously, you've made some changes and things have changed in ways that you didn't expect, or you're making changes on the fly. and the directors making their choices, and so they don't necessarily connect to what the way you saw it necessarily. Because I mean, I had been working with Charles, so Charles has a very distinct style. He knows exactly. I mean, you know, a Charles movie, like it's a very specific style. So when the movie was done, I was like, you know what? There was enough here. Like we're gonna be okay. Like there's enough here. When they cut this together, it's gonna be good. And so they cut it together, the director's cut, and it was kind of a mess. Kind of a mess. Okay, so then, and Charles is calling me. He's like, "Oh my God, this is a disaster." I'm like, "Wait, it's early on. You know, we've got some time." And this stays between all of us. So basically, what happens is about halfway through post production, Netflix decided to shift gears, and they brought in another editor, and this editor changed it drastically, very different than what the movie. You know, there were whole parts of the movie that were completely gone, things that dealt with the kids that were a lot of fun. That got taken out. The movie dropped from like it was like an hour and 20 something minutes. It was like, you know, originally it was going to be like an hour and 45, 50. So they just cut huge swaths of stuff, and it's one of those moments where you have to kind of like it's like a, you know, you're seeing how they make the sausage,
Hmm.
right? You're kind of in the process, and you have to like be grateful, obviously, because you're getting a movie made, and it's going to be on Netflix, and it winds up being number one in the world, right? And you're like, this is amazing. At the same time, you can't get out of your head what's not there, right? Because
Hmm.
you know what's missing. You're the only one that knows what's missing. That's what I always like to talk about too in terms of writing. Is we're the only ones that know what's missing. When we start cutting stuff, a lot of times we can't see it without those scenes because they're still in our head.
Hmm.
But the person that's reading it or seeing it for the first time, they have no idea what's missing. And so it's kind of hard. There's this part of you that's like you can't quite wrap your head around that. So it's hard to do that. But it wound up obviously doing very successfully for Netflix. And then I pitched them on another project, which got hired to write. And one of the things about writing a project for them is they're very intentional in terms of what they want to what they want in terms of budget. So how many locations, right? How many sort of hero locations there are, or big set pieces. How many characters? Very specific number of characters that you can stay within this range. You don't want any more than this particular number. You don't want any more than this particular number of locations. These are very specific things that they tell you right from the start that you have to form it towards.
Do they break that down by genre?
Um, I don't know, just because my experience was obviously Christmas movie and romantic comedy because the second one
Okay.
was romantic comedy. So
Hmm.
so for romantic comedy and also the I think the budget obviously plays a big role. So like there's a range. So in this particular instance, it was a range I think like 5 to 15 or something like that, or 10 to 20, something in that range. So they know what they can do, and
Hmm.
they've done it over and over again. You know, it's kind of works like a corporation in that way. Like they're very intentional in terms of what they know. They've crunched the numbers. You know, they know how many viewers. Blah 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 blah. So it's more data driven than more like than a studio is. Well, traditional studio nowadays it's probably more data driven as well.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so can you tell everybody a little bit about what you're working on now, even if it's in general terms? I know you don't want to share too much, but I know that you've got a couple of things in the hopper that sound pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm always sort of working on different types of projects. So and they come from whether it's in the book world or the film world. And in the film world, I had this opportunity. This author of the book Noel Diary, this guy Richard Paul Evans, who's every book he writes is a bestseller. He's sold over 40 million books. He's just a huge author. I became friends with him. He had written the Noel Diary, so I got to know him at the premiere for that. And then later, my co-writer and I connected, and we were going to do an adaptation of Finding Noel, which was another book in his series. And so that is we pitched that around town. That's kind of gone out. We're trying to find financing for that. And the next one is a book that we had this idea, and this sort of inspiration in him to write a book about it. And it's a book about the sort of the creation of the foster system in the United States and where it began. And it's this amazing story about this woman, Etta Wheeler, and what she did to save this little girl, Mary Ellen
Mm.
Wilson, in 1874. And so it was kind of an interesting thing because we had the movie idea, and then we talked to Rick, and he's like looking for what his next book was going to be. And he was like, you know what? I think this is going to be my next book. And so we are sort of adapting his book that hasn't been, he just finished writing, but it won't come out until November. And so we're working on the pitch for the film, and it's just a really cool story. And every now and then those kinds of things happen. My very good friend Mark Klein wrote a book called The In Between, and he had written the script. He was starting to write the book. He wasn't finished with the book, and then he wrote the script. Well, the script sold with the book. They started shooting the movie, and he was still writing the book. And so they were trying to time it so that the book would come out a few months before the film. So kind of an interesting situation where he's on set, and they're shooting this movie. They shot in North Carolina, as a matter of fact, and then also having to write the book, finish the book for the publisher. So yeah, so I'm working on that, and now I've got this other project with this producer Andrew Lazar, that is a horror type movie. And again, to talk about the importance of mentors in life, and especially in what we do in writing and creativity. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they're really important. They really
Yes,
help
they
you.
are.
They're sort of like personal trainers, right? In a sense, like they hold you to account, and not only give you knowledge, but the experience that they bring to it, like having dealt with it. And obviously, in my life, I've had mentors that were much younger than me, and my hypnosis mentor. But with Charles, he was my storytelling mentor, and now I'm working with this gentleman by the name of Martin Olson, who I've known forever, who's an amazing writer. He wrote a lot of the songs and scripts for Phineas and Ferb. If you know the show Phineas and Ferb, he's worked on Phineas and Ferb times, on the new one now, the new seasons, and he's written some books as well. He's a really interesting, incredibly fun, creative, talented person, and I get to work with him. And he teaches me. They teach you without even realizing they're teaching you, right? Like you get this experience of how they approach stuff, and it's such a great influence on the work you do. So
Very
We
nice.
agree. Yeah.
So our
Uh,
friend Karen has a 5-part question.
5 part. Okay, let's
I'll
hear
go,
it.
I'll dole them out a little at a time. First of all, the restrictions that are put on you, such as cast size, do you find that that is more difficult to work with, or does it give you some much needed parameters?
Oh, it's totally much needed parameters. It's great because it
It's
helps
a really
us.
good question.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
helps us think in terms of our goal is to get something greenlit, right?
Hmm.
So as a writer, your goal is to not only herd a bunch of cats to get involved with the project and get the financing, you want it you want it to cross the finish line. You want to get it greenlit. And so anything that's going to stand in the way of that,
Hmm.
figure out a creative way around it. And so when they give you that, it's like, oh, only 4 locations. Well, how about 3? You know what I mean? Like you just try to make it even more palatable. And you start thinking in those terms. So for us in this particular romantic comedy, we were able to like integrate 2 locations into one. Very easily, and it was like, oh, actually, this works, and it affords us other things that we weren't necessarily seeing before creatively that could work and be funnier and etc. So it's helpful.
Hmm. That's great. Um, so is that kind of a natural way for you to solve that, or did hypnosis play a part in helping you get to that place?
Um, no, I mean, I think
I
it's just a
paraphrased badly her the other 4 questions.
yeah. Uh,
So,
no, I think it's more of a natural thing. The hypnosis helps with the the stuff that keeps us from writing and finishing things. It's really about mindset, which, like I said, is something that I feel like is lacking in terms of for creatives in particular. We're very introspective people, right? We spend a lot of time thinking,
Hmm.
and because of that, we can create a lot of reasons not to do things. Like we're in our head a lot. And there's that. I got this advice from a producer once said, "Writers write," and it's like, yeah, writers write, and the problem is that a lot of times writers don't want to write. Like we don't have whatever it is that we need, and we've got so there's things that are happening and interfering with that creative flow. So how do we get over it? And we just write. That's to me where the creative hypnosis really helps. It helps with the mindset and getting over those blocks. And I mean, the other part of it too is I would say the first part of writer's block, right, is possessive. Okay, right, it's your block, and that block can look like a bunch of different things. The first initial way to try to slay those dragons is through what I would call like taking a story rep, right? Asking yourself a question, just writing and getting it out of your head. Even if, like, if you're at a particular juncture in a story and you're having a hard time getting through it, I would say write the bad version. Write the worst version. You can throw the rules out of the story world. Just write the terrible version. Get it out, get something down, and then you can see what's working, what doesn't work, and you create space for more ideas. So whenever I'm working with writer friends, we always talk about give me the bad version. Like if they go, well, this isn't quite working, you go, well, give me the bad version. What's the bad version that would fix this? Because a lot of times the bad version will give you ideas on what you need to fix,
Mhm.
what really is the problem.
Great.
Jeremy asked about Best Christmas Ever, wondering what your pitch looked like. How did you structure that pitch? And I forgot if you said it, did you pitch it to Netflix right away or was it other platforms as well?
No, so with Best Christmas Ever, that was a script. So we really didn't have to pitch it. It was a screenplay. It went out. And they read it and then they decided from there. The pitch that I sold to Netflix, that was a pitch. That was a traditional, get in front of the executives and pitch the story, pitch the movie. For me, my co-writer and I structure our pitches very uniquely. I think we tell the story and we have dialogue and this sort of thing. So we set it up and then we actually we just tell them the story. And it should only be about 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, maybe 15, maybe 15. But we go back and forth. So with the dialogue, we act it out, we go back and forth, right? She'll take character. And then we also just move back and forth. So we're keeping it somewhat fresh because you can kind of tell when you lose people. Uh, Attention spans are not high, so you want to just continually sort of engage. And so structurally those pitches are just designed to be like, okay, here's the story, here's what we're going for, here's the log line, and we jump in and we tell the story and we go back and forth and then we wrap it up.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's been almost an hour, but I want to make sure that I know that you wanted to share with our group a little bit more about what you have online, your online class, etc. Can you just recap that a little bit? And I think you had something special to share with them as well.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about the course or work with me, you go to toddgallicano.com. You'll see everything there. There's the course, the Power of Myth Making course, which, like we talked about, it integrates the hypnosis and also the story stuff. And then there's creative hypnosis sessions that are you can book with me. And then I also offer mentorships, very limited amount, obviously, because of the time commitment. And those are sort of 3 month or 6 month, mainly 3 month, where I'm doing biweekly calls with you and doing hypnosis, creative hypnosis, and helping you through the process, the writing process. So it's it's more of a one-on-one private, obviously private thing. And let's see, what was my notes on this? Yes, so we talked about this, John. So if you are interested in the course, in the creative hypnosis sessions, or in the mentorship, you can use the promo code. I created a promo code called Ignite. You get 10% off of whatever it is you choose to do. And yeah, and
And I
that is
just put that in the chat box, everybody. So his link and the code is right there if you want to take that down for later.
yeah.
Um,
If there's anything else that I'm missing here. Da-da-da. Yeah, you can learn all about it. So you can learn about the mentorship. It's application based, and then the hypnosis sessions as well, and the course.
Yeah, and we'll put that information in an email sometime next week and send out as well. But yeah, before we head on out today, and first of all, just Todd, thank you so much. This has been very interesting. It's a whole nother
Yep. Thank you.
facet of creativity and storytelling.
Can I leave you?
Uh,
Can I leave you with my craziest Hollywood story?
oh,
Oh, yeah.
Something fun.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Something fun
Please
to leave
do.
you with. Okay, because I mentioned it briefly, and I feel like I need
Yes,
to
that's right.
deliver.
Yeah, please do.
James Dean, I was hired. I was fresh out of college. I get hired by this company, and they bring me in, and they tell me they want me to write a biographical drama based on the life of James Dean. I love James Dean. And they gave me this big box of material. And on the top of the box was this book called The Mutant King, which I actually own here. Here it is. This book, it's like the quintessential book on Dean. And I thought, great, I can use this, and this will be great source material. And they said, no, we don't own the rights to that book. You can't use it. And I said, okay, well, what am I using? Am I using it in public domain? Like, what's going to happen here? And he said, well, we've been working with a world-renowned channeler who's been channeling Jimmy for years. And we want you to work with her. Her name's Carol Austin. And so you're going to go and you're going to work with her and you're going to talk to Jimmy and get what you need from this person. I was out of college. I was starving artist, and I said, yes, absolutely, 100%. I didn't even know what channeling was. I hadn't experienced it before. And so I wind up going up to, she lives in Santa Cruz. Those of you in California know, of course, she lived in Santa Cruz. And so I go up to Santa Cruz with one of the producers, a friend of mine who I met at Dino De Laurentiis. And we go and we meet with this woman, Carol Austin. And she's this literally a little woman in a rocking chair, and she had this tape recorder, and she would just sort of sit there, close her eyes, and she would say, this is all real. She would say, begin transmission. You may ask your first question. And then you would ask your question, and she would speak as Jimmy. In many ways, it wasn't that she was. It's if you've ever experienced channeling, it's really interesting because it's like if you've ever been on the phone with someone and there's somebody else in the room, and the person you're trying to communicate to the person in the room what this person's saying. So you're repeating it, but you're repeating it in a weird way, like you're doing it in bursts, right? Because you're just repeating. You're not thinking, you're repeating. And it's a very different kind of flavor of communication, right? That's sort of the energy of it, the rhythm of it is very different. It's very fractured. And that's what it sounded like. It sounded like she was being told something and then repeating it. Yeah, it was wild. For me, it was really interesting because what I did was I integrated. I focused more on the emotional stuff rather than obviously the story stuff I knew, the structure, the things that had happened in his life from a timeline perspective. And then what I would work with Carol on was like, okay, what was he feeling in this moment with this Pierre Angeli, which was this actress that he was in love with? What was the feeling here? And it was incredibly like insightful. I don't know. I mean, there's another part of the story that made me believe that it was 100% true. But basically, it was like at the very least, I was getting this emotional aspect or dimension to the project that I wasn't, as a 20-something kid, was not really like that locked into. So
When you first entered that or heard about it, did you go into the session believing that there was such a thing, or did it take you time to
it
come
took time.
around, or were you completely like
It
Yeah,
took
no,
time. It took
it took
time.
time.
Yeah, it took time. So,
Yeah.
but there was a moment where then it kind of like was like, okay, something's happening here that I can't explain. And that's
Wow.
been my experience in as I was sort of studying this stuff with energy work and such that led me down the path of into creative hypnosis. I would experience things that I couldn't explain. And they were repeatable things that were surprising to me. And when I experienced that, that's kind of what sold me on these different things, different states of mind, etc. So
So how did that James Dean project end?
it just ended. The company, I turned it in. I mean, I was just looking at the script the other day because I was reminded of it. Because oh, there's a photo of me with Carol. I had it out. There she is.
Huh.
Very young. And so the company was this foreign. It was a international distribution company that financed movies, and it wound up just kind of going out of business. And they weren't able ever to get the financing for it. So I got paid, but then the company sort of folded, and it didn't.
Okay.
But now I've got this great. At some point, I'm gonna tell this story in some form.
Hmm.
A lot of
Yeah,
fun.
that
So
does sound fun.
anyway, so
Well,
that's
that
what I wanted
interesting
to yeah
experience. Yeah, at
wanted
least you
to
and at least you got
Yeah.
paid as well. So,
exactly that's the key. So
and yeah, before we go, we just want to mention real quick, and I'll put a link in the chat box for those who have not gone to one of our retreats. Robin, is there anything you'd like to say
Oh, I'd
about
just like to
our
say
upcoming
thank you,
retreat?
Todd.
oh yeah.
Super interesting and very informative. And just this little bit of info has opened up my eyes to a couple of things.
Great.
And I am signing up for your course. So there
Wahoo!
we go.
Cool. Yes, and thank you for giving us this special code. I have a feeling you're gonna have a few people sign up for this.
Yeah, and you
All
can follow me
right.
at Todd CG if you're on Instagram.
Todd
Okay.
CG
Yeah,
on Instagram.
that is
Okay.
correct.
Thanks again, Todd, and
Thank
we'll see you
you.
Thank
all next
you.
week.
Thank you.